I was the family's disappointment until I became a millionaire. Now they want me back, but I had other plans. I sat at the head of the long, polished dinner table, the same one I wasn't allowed to sit at growing up. Across from me, my parents smiled nervously, my siblings watching me like I was a stranger. Now that I was successful, suddenly I was welcome. They had ignored me for years, mocked my dreams, and told me I'd never amount to anything. But now, they wanted me back. Too bad for them, I had other plans. Growing up, I was never the favorite. My parents had a clear hierarchy. My older brother was the golden child, my younger sister was the angel, and I was the failure. No matter what I did, I was never good enough. I wasn't athletic like my brother or effortlessly charming like my sister. I was just the kid who didn't fit in. Every time I tried to prove myself, I was shot down. When I got straight A's, my father scoffed and said, "School smarts won't get you anywhere." When I talked about starting my own business one day, my mother laughed and told me to get a real job like your brother. Every passion I had was dismissed, every success ignored. It didn't take long before I stopped trying to impress them. After high school, things got worse. My parents pushed me to follow in my brother's footsteps. Go to law school, make them proud. But I refused. I had dreams of building something for myself, of starting a business. They called me a fool. My father's last words before kicking me out were, "You'll come crawling back when you fail." I left with nothing but a cheap laptop and a fire in my chest. I had no safety net, no family support, and no backup plan. I worked dead-end jobs while learning everything I could about business. I spent nights sleeping in my car, eating ramen for weeks just to afford a Wi-Fi connection. Failure wasn't an option. I had to prove them wrong. Years passed, and I built an empire from scratch. I took risks, I learned from my mistakes, and I refused to give up. Slowly but surely, my business grew. One day, I checked my bank account and saw 7 figures staring back at me. I had done it. I was a millionaire. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was my mother. After years of silence, suddenly she wanted to catch up. At first, I thought it was a joke, but then she said the words that made my blood run cold. "We'd love to have you over for dinner." I almost laughed. After all these years, now they wanted me back. When I was struggling, sleeping in my car, they never cared. When I needed them the most, they turned their backs on me. But now that I was successful, now I was suddenly worth their time. I played along. I wanted to see it for myself, to hear their fake apologies, to watch them pretend they had always believed in me. When I arrived at their house, nothing had changed. The same walls that once felt like a prison, the same cold looks I grew up with. But this time, there was something different. The moment I stepped inside, my father clapped me on the back like we were old friends. "Look at you. I always knew you'd make it big." My mother piled my plate with food, smiling like she hadn't cut me off for years. My brother and sister, once so dismissive, suddenly hung onto every word I said. They weren't here to reconnect. They were here for something else. They were here for something else. Then came the real reason for the invitation. My father cleared his throat, his smile faltering. "So, we've been having some financial troubles." I leaned back, waiting for it. My mother sighed dramatically and said, "We could really use your help." There it was. They didn't want me back. They wanted my money. I asked them why they thought I would help them after everything they had done. My sister had the nerve to roll her eyes and say, "Family helps family." My brother chimed in, acting like he had always supported me. "Come on, man. You have so much. It wouldn't even hurt you." The entitlement in their voices was unbelievable. I reminded them of all the times I needed help and they ignored me. My father shrugged and said, "We just wanted you to learn responsibility." My mother smiled, like she thought I would just brush it all aside. "We're proud of you now. That's what matters, right?" My hands clenched under the table. They still didn't get it. Then, my brother made the mistake of pushing me too far. "You can either help us, or you can prove us right. That you really are selfish." I almost laughed at the irony. They abandoned me, dismissed me, and now they had the audacity to call me selfish. I looked around at the people who once called me a disappointment and realized something. I didn't owe them a damn thing. I took a deep breath, letting the tension hang in the air. They really thought they could manipulate me back into their lives? After years of calling me a failure, a disappointment, now I was supposed to save them? I wasn't the helpless kid they once controlled. I was the one with the power now. I leaned forward, meeting my father's eyes. "You need my help?" I asked, feigning concern. He nodded eagerly, his pride cracking under the weight of his desperation. My mother, always the emotional manipulator, placed a hand over mine. "We're still family, sweetheart." Family? That word meant nothing to me anymore. When I was struggling, they left me behind without a second thought. My father was the one who kicked me out. My mother never called, and my siblings treated me like a joke. But now that they were drowning, I was their only lifeline. Too bad for them. I had no intention of saving them. I decided to test them. "Okay," I said, watching their faces light up. "I'll help, but only if you apologize. Right here, right now. Admit that you were wrong." My brother scoffed. My sister rolled her eyes, but my parents hesitated. That's when I knew. They weren't sorry. They just wanted my money. My father's face darkened. "This isn't about the past. We're struggling. You wouldn't even be here without us." My mother tried a softer approach, squeezing my hand. "Don't be cruel, honey. We didn't mean to hurt you." I pulled my hand away. Their words meant nothing. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they needed me now. Then my brother made one last mistake. "You have millions. It's not like it'll even affect you." The entitlement in his voice was enough to make my blood boil. They still saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. They didn't care about me. They just cared about what I could do for them. I stood up, grabbing my coat. "You're right," I said, looking them dead in the eyes. "I do have millions, but you have nothing." I turned to walk away, my heart pounding. But before I left, I had one last thing to say. Something they would never forget. I paused at the door, turning back to face them. "Before I go, let me ask you something," I said, my voice calm. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother's smile faltered. "If I had failed, if I was still struggling, would you have ever reached out?" Silence. Their expressions said everything I needed to know. I let out a bitter laugh. That's what I thought. They never cared about me. They only cared about what I had. And yet, somehow I still wasn't prepared for what came next. Because my mother finally spoke, and her words sent ice through my veins. "We did try to reach out," she said quietly. "You just never got our messages." My stomach twisted. That was a lie. I had never gotten a single call, a single text. I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" My mother hesitated, glancing at my brother and sister. And that's when it clicked. Something was off. Then my sister sighed dramatically. "Oh, just tell him." She crossed her arms, looking annoyed. "Dad told us to block you years ago. He didn't want you distracted while you were struggling." My breath caught in my throat. They didn't just abandon me. They made sure I had no way back. I turned to my father, my chest tightening. "You blocked me?" He had always been cold, but this was calculated. He had erased me from the family. While I was starving, homeless, struggling to survive, he made sure no one could help me. They had written me off completely. My fists clenched at my sides. "And now, you want my help?" The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. They had cut me off, let me suffer, and now they wanted me to save them? I could feel my body trembling. Not with sadness, but with rage. This wasn't just betrayal. This was cruelty. My father had the nerve to shrug. "We thought it was for the best," he muttered. My mother nodded, as if that made it okay. They had decided my fate for me. They thought I was nothing, so they made sure I stayed that way. But they made one mistake, betting against me. Word spread quickly. I didn't just walk away. I exposed them. I told extended family, old friends, and even people from our hometown what they had done. Some were shocked, horrified that my parents could be so cruel. Others, they made excuses. My aunt called, furious. "I always knew they treated you differently, but this is disgusting." She told me she had tried reaching out years ago, but my parents told her I wanted nothing to do with the family. They had lied to everyone. They hadn't just erased me, they rewrote the story to make me the villain. But not everyone took my side. My grandparents were devastated, but not at my parents, at me. They told me I should have just helped, that family is family. My grandmother's voice trembled when she said, "They made mistakes, but you need to forgive them." It was clear. Some people would never hold them accountable. My brother called me next, his voice dripping with resentment. "You had to go and embarrass us, huh?" He wasn't sorry for what they did. He was angry that I didn't keep it quiet. "You think money makes you better than us?" he spat. But I didn't think I was better. I just wasn't stupid enough to fall for their manipulation. My sister, on the other hand, tried a different approach. "We were just kids," she said, suddenly playing innocent. "We were just doing what Dad told us." She acted like she had no choice, like she hadn't benefited from my suffering, but I wasn't buying it. She had a voice, and she chose to stay silent. Then came the real shock. My mother showed up at my office. She walked past security, right into the lobby, tears in her eyes. In front of everyone, she begged for another chance. But I knew her well enough to see the truth. This wasn't regret. This was desperation. My employees watched in stunned silence as she sobbed. "I just want my son back," she wailed. But I wasn't her son when she blocked me. I wasn't her son when she let me suffer. I wasn't her son until I became useful again. I didn't fall for it. I had spent my whole life chasing their approval, and for what? A family that never wanted me unless I could benefit them. I finally saw them for what they really were, and I was done pretending they deserved another chance. I stood there, staring at my mother as she sobbed in the middle of my office lobby. The same woman who never called when I was homeless. The same woman who blocked me out of her life like I was nothing. And now, with an audience watching, she wanted to play the role of the heartbroken mother. I wasn't falling for it. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "You're embarrassing yourself," I said, my voice cold. She gasped like I had slapped her, but I didn't care. She deserved to feel even a fraction of the humiliation she put me through. I motioned to my security guard. "Escort her out." She panicked. "No, please, just talk to me." Her voice cracked, but it wasn't real. It was the same manipulation I had seen my whole life. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for what she lost. 2 security guards flanked her, and suddenly the power dynamic had shifted. She wasn't in control anymore. My employees whispered as they watched her being led out. The great, proud woman who once mocked me was now nothing more than a desperate mess. She begged, screamed my name, but I didn't flinch. As the doors closed behind her, I felt something I had never felt before. Relief. But my father wasn't done yet. That night I got a long email from him. A rant disguised as an apology. He claimed he had done what he thought was best and accused me of being heartless. He still couldn't take responsibility. And that's when I realized they would never change. I typed out a single response. Actions have consequences. That was it. No explanation, no emotional closure, just the truth. They made their choices. Now they had to live with them. The fallout was worse than I expected. My father lost his job when word spread about what he did. My brother struggled, drowning in debt without me to bail him out. And my sister? She tried to reach out again, but I ignored her. I had no space for parasites in my life anymore. For the first time, I was truly free. No more begging for approval. No more waiting for scraps of love from people who never cared. I had built my success alone, and I would live my life on my own terms. They weren't my family anymore. As I stood in my office, overlooking the city I had conquered, I smiled. They had once told me I was a disappointment, but now I was the one who had won. Cutting them off was the best decision I ever made. I didn't just escape their toxicity, I reclaimed my life. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more waiting for love that was never real. For the first time, I was truly at peace. and I never looked back. My business continued to thrive. Every milestone, every achievement, I celebrated without them. No fake smiles, no forced family gatherings, just real success, built with my own hands. I traveled the world, met incredible people, and surrounded myself with those who actually cared. I had finally built the life they told me I'd never have. As for my family, things only got worse for them. Without me to save them, their world crumbled. My father never recovered from his financial mistakes. My mother kept trying to play the victim, but no one believed her anymore. And my siblings, they had to learn what it felt like to struggle, without a scapegoat to blame. Occasionally, I'd hear updates from distant relatives. My parents were still waiting for me to come back. They still believed somehow that I'd forgive them, that I'd show up one day with open arms, but they never understood something important. I wasn't the same person they abandoned. I had outgrown them. People ask if I regret not forgiving them. The truth? Not for a second. Forgiveness is for people who actually show remorse. My family never did. They only regretted losing what I could give them. Not me. And that's the difference. I built my life through struggle, through pain, through sheer determination. They thought I'd always be the failure, the disappointment. But in the end, I was the only one who ever truly succeeded. I don't hate them anymore. I don't feel anything for them at all. They're strangers to me now, nothing more than ghosts of a past I left behind, and I intend to keep it that way. It's been years since I last spoke to my family. They still try to reach out occasionally, but their messages go unanswered. My assistant filters out their emails, and any unknown numbers are immediately blocked. They lost access to me the day they made their choice, and I have no intention of ever looking back. Last I heard, my father had to sell the house, my mother was living with a distant relative, and my siblings had gone their separate ways. They finally got a taste of the struggle they once mocked me for, but it's not my concern anymore. I have my own life, my own success, and a future that has nothing to do with them, and that's exactly the way I want it. And that's how the so-called disappointment became the one who had the last laugh. What do you think? Should they have forgiven their family, or did they make the right call by cutting them off for good? Let us know in the comments. If you love stories with revenge, betrayal, and epic payback, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.